balance in the dress or kind of the pressure goes forwards and backwards. Be good, guys? Just for the camera, really. So I'm going to get them just only because the camera will pick up all the distraction. Around why can many people appear to dress very forwards? It really goes back to most people when they stand, they kind of stand like this anyway. I call it, you know, Titanic, the film, the kind of Kate Winslet posture on the ship. We're all a bit like Kate Winslet, most people that dress, they're being, because of gravity pulls us forwards. So a really nice way of seeing that is going to look at the length of the toe. If you kind of lean forwards a bit, guys, you might find your toes start to grab, is a way of stopping yourself falling forwards. So most of us through design kind of stand like this because gravity pulls us forwards. We get these kind of very extended positions. You may recall, going back to November, we talked about the tripods to feet. So just to kind of revisit that very loosely. And again, it really goes back to people are so, what's the right word to use? Just kind of lazy because it's easier bending rather than actually kind of really bending through those hip joints. So typically, everyone just kind of stand up nice and tall. So we kind of mentioned the feet last time. Had that kind of tripod. You've got kind of 4 connection points in the feet. We'll call it 3 today because it's easy, so there are 4, we'll call it 3. Middle of the heel, this part the big toe, this part the little toe. For the joints. Everyone just stand nice and tall for me. And just take whatever time again that you need, just to establish equal pressure across those 3 points on each foot. Through the heel, through the base of the big toe, and the base of the little toe, not the front of it, so not the toenail, the actual base of the joint. Once you've kind of established that, a little kind of, when you're bending your knee, as you kind of glide the pelvis backwards, maintain those pressure points equal across the feet. That may possibly just give you a different perception of standing. You look at a lot of people, I do this a lot from players in behind, it's not unusual to see a lot of players a bit like this. They've kind of lost that heel connection. When we've lost the heel connection, that the heel inherently connects into the glutes, believe it or not. So anatomically, that the ankle and goes back to we talked about this stuff. I mentioned you might feel it more for that right ankle. So that the ankle and the hip are inherently connected. We talk about glute activity so much. Again, it's such a well-established story. This a lot of glute activity goes into heel connection. So when we kind of lose this stuff, we get why are these kind of. And another very good question you've mentioned there. So just the tripod, bending through the hip joint. Well, you're right. Most people, if anything, a little bit too. And also people, if anything, stand a bit too far away. So if you're going to be one way, stand well. If you're going to be one way, that too much close to the ball would be the feedback there. And also I think I've completely forgotten what I'm going to say myself now. Talking about the feet is so important. I've just completely distracted myself. I'll come back to it. I'm sure I'll come back to this. So talking about feet and standing too far, too close. What was I saying? I'll come back to it. And so going back to the idea of kind of setup again, we can play this. We talked about the idea of the compressed rib cage, one I actually forgot to give you earlier on. Hanging is still the best for this. If you can't hang, a little way of almost decompressing, you want to do it. Everyone just kind of hands up to the ceiling like so, so not feet, was kind of this part of the hand upwards. And as you breathe in, without extending backwards, push the hands up. And as you exhale, keep the rib cage elevated. Every time you breathe in, push the heel of the hand upwards, but without extending backwards. And you may already start to feel you expand and open up around those upper ribs. It's a form of kind of hanging without hanging. So you get a bit kind of fatigued through the day and a bit you've been on the range a long time and that kind of stuff. That's the way I've really kind of opened up. Anyone feel a bit stiff in their spine there? And, yeah. Be very careful when you do it.
See the faces over there.
Be very aware, guys, that when you reach up, you don't extend. So be very precise as you breathe in, or pushing up without extending backwards. So just allow yourself every in-breath just to go a centimetre further up. Push up through here, not the fingers. And where you're just kind of decompressing that. You may even feel one side, my friend has a little bit unpleasant there, so again, you just probably throw down that around where it's going to reach there. But when I say something myself, I'm just annoyed with myself now. That I kind of yes, I remember it, sorry. Jet lag up again, Hank. Probably, and I wanted to really go through this because I look at that. It really is in some ways it connects up those three main areas we discussed this one around compressed trail side, the right shoulder and left hip, that kind of wonderful sling those connected parts. Probably the most kind of realistic way of actually understanding transition, which is what we're going to know about lead side and pelvis, because it really goes back to your question. Probably the most realistic way of really understanding why players move the way they do in transition is look at the way how they stand in life. How they stand in life in many ways reveals transition. That's why I'm such an observer of standing. Because what happens is that as soon as you move in transition, you really expose your body to huge amounts of force. So you really kind of start down, regardless of that helical shape, but not regardless in some ways, but when you move in transition, you really expose your body to tremendous amounts of forcing. So gravity and force really compress us. Whatever your dominant standing position is, you will get compressed in that direction. Why do so many young players move this way through impact? Look at how most young boys particularly stand. The minute you get exposed to tons of force, good luck not moving that way. So you get guys that kind of stand this way. The minute they move in transition, then while they start to move that way, it then likes to help those ligaments. So the minute you get exposed to huge amounts of force, it'll always deform towards the dominant standing position. So if you just observe someone standing, the boys, it's not fair what boys do. Ladies can be a bit more ligaments because they've got wider pelvises, they can stand a bit more this way. People stand a bit like this. The minute they move in transition, you'll defer towards or migrate towards that standing position. And it goes back once again to that the helical shape. If your body is being pulled or compressed in a direction, so in Ben's case, a bit kind of this way, so if your helix, your human frame has that adaptation, the minute you expose it to load, and it goes back to, again, never ever did I say deadlifts are not good for you. They're great for you. And squats are good for you. But if there's that internal pull in a direction, which we're then doing our best to kind of avoid, the minute you put more loads for that, you get more compressed into those directional pulls. So priority number one is just to stand well. It resolves so much. That's why these things are just not particularly pleasant. If you're sticky. But again, it's pushing up through the wrist, not the fingers. And as you breathe in, you don't extend, you just grow almost and lengthen up the wall. So a little way to set up so important. A good question. Right, lead hip. Really goes back to those kind of references you showed on screen this morning. And I think we'll start with the idea around, I think most of us, most of us are very familiar with the idea of kind of pelvis thorax separation, where it should be pelvis and lumbar spine thorax separation. Regardless of that kind of frame shape again, what's quite evident in transition with the really established movers is almost a timing, again, of when the pelvis glides to when it rotates. So again, really very good, regardless of kind of most movers, quite typically in transition, that how the pelvis starts to just kind of glide laterally as it then rotates. Often where you see many issues in players is it will rotate before it glides or continues to glide without rotating. So it's very much that kind of concept of kind of lateral rotation. And the pelvis just starts to glide as it rotates. So what references can we use? I think still for me one of my kind of favourite ones or most kind of reliable ones, Hank, is at impact. more so the lead hip, lead knee, lead ankle, and pretty much in alignment. We can look at that on a scale. That do we get that lead knee outside that lead hip? That's why then you see so many players these days are obsessed by this, which is a whole different discussion. It's just the anatomy movement again. Or we get the hip outside the ankle joint. So it's a pretty good, again, you go back to, this is where squats become so valuable now. Squats and pedals are great for this. The idea of that kind of nice alignment through the joints. You hopefully wouldn't start to squat these ways. So if we're trying to produce real good kind of vertical force, why would you do it in this position? So in a playful way, again, do it sensibly to a level you're happy to do it. Just kind of stand like this for me with your kind of knees out, and then just try and jump as high as you can. Then kind of put your joints in good alignment and hopefully jump much higher. So why would you actively encourage to get the knee outside the hip joint is again a question we can probably ask social media perhaps. We do it as a group. And then equally so, you wouldn't want the hip too far outside that ankle joint. So let's just start to play with it again. Hands and arms across rib cage. And just start to kind of align and match up. We'll talk about the foot in a second. Can we get an impact? Lead ankle, lead knee, lead hip. Pretty much aligned at impact. And we'll look at how the feet contribute to this shortly. And that's then goes for, I like going through the various ranges, the various scales. Then if you can, guys, just on the next one, let the knee move outside the ankle and the hip. Just start to reference how that influences rotation. You might get a little bit kind of jammed up in certain places, it might be unpleasant in certain areas. Then I'll really start to use that hang, get the hip outside the ankle. Again, just start to see how that really, very good, Ben. And,
this is familiar.
You've been great today, Ben, by the way. You can definitely come again. So you look at most of the good ones, how that pelvis glides, then as it rotates. So ankle, knee, hip, and alignment. Just looking at the feet as individual contributors now becomes very important. This is why these big toes are so influential on how we move in every level. And again, it goes back to something Lucy and I saw so much of when you was here last month. Looking at that trail foot, the right foot initially. Kind of everyone use their hands for this. Just kind of push your thumb up like this. Hopefully you can all see that kind of long bone. They're called metacarpals in the hands. Or kind of extend your fingers. You might see the bones in the back of your hands. So if these are your feet, those are called metatarsals, those long bones. So if this was big toe, and do this at home with your shoes and socks off, it's pretty easy to see. You kind of pick up your big toe, you'll see that long bone in the foot become quite visible. And that bone goes in pretty much to the middle of the ankle joint, which is why ankles are so important again. So that long first metatarsal, the long bone here, goes pretty much into the middle of the ankle. So humans are actually being designed very well. We've been pretty cleverly made. We're still messed up, but we were designed well, thankfully. That kind of big toe metatarsal is so important because it's the line of force within the human body. The line of force in the foot all goes along that long bone, which if you want to even take your shoes off, if you're that comfortable, you kind of you can pick your toe up. You can look at that long bone that goes into the ankle, which is why that good ankle connection. What controls the ankle in many ways, how the shoulder moves. So a lot of it connects like shoulders do. As you move and very good, yeah. So Ben, just kind of, if everyone's happy just to gather around Ben and...
Yeah, smell my feet, come on.
Yeah. Don't come too close, please.
Very good, Ben. Just pick up your big toe for me. See that long bone suddenly appears and it goes into the middle of the ankle. Very good, Ben. Thank you for that. So the guys want to see this more visibly. So that's the line of force. When we rotate or move, most of the force and pressure moves along that long bone. So it moves along that bone towards the big toe. So for us to rotate this way, we're having to push force along that long bone of the foot. So the big toe is actually called the elastic point of rotation. So to rotate, we kind of move force along that bone and push into that big toe. So let's just play with that again now. Hands and arms across rib cage. As the pelvis glides, move pressure along that bone into that big toe. Yeah, brilliant. Very good. That's great. Enjoy the rest of your day. Good. So you move along that bone. Very good. That's great. You guys are good. Here's one for you now. Just try and move it more towards your middle of your toes or your little toes and start down. See how it changes how you... So let the pressure move towards your little toe in transition. Big toes are pretty important. Then going into that lead foot then. So once you're going to move along that lead foot, really in many ways it connects back to how, not how long, it's the wrong phrase, but it's ensuring as best you can keep that big toe connected. It can be very precise, or you think which doesn't matter, but the actual joint, not the nail with the big toe, can you keep that part of the big toe connected until point of impact? So let's just start to, again, as you move along that big toe, as you start to glide the pelvis laterally, as you start to kind of move into that big toe, can we keep that connection to a level through that big toe? And again, just start to relate that back to rotation, a logo joint, those kind of things. On this one now, guys, almost lose that big toe connection in transition. How that starts to change how we move. Different. So again, you'll see guys, you know, it's quite, Justin Thomas has been a good example, they really lose that early. It just shows how good they could become. They didn't do that way. These guys are somebody good despite these movements. There's a reason why, I'm not sure why, but he's always got his wrist taped and other issues as well, because we know a lot of wrist pain connects back to foot and ankle. So post-impact for sure, it needs to do with things for obvious reasons. But certainly inside impact, it's really ensuring as best you can we keep that big toe connected until pretty much point of impact. And why that becomes so important, those that have got clubs, if everyone got a club with them, if not, if they could share, just grab a club each now. Or if one of your friends is happy, you can maybe share. You could probably come out a bit further now. Just come a little closer over here, guys. If the sun's out, let's come and enjoy a bit of afternoon sunshine. It's good for your biochemical hormone release. I love very kind of arbitrary observations. So this is actually the strongest frequency of sunlight of the day. This is the kind of peak. So there's about 100 different frequencies of sunlight you get exposed to every day. When you use your mobile phone, it's the same strength as the 2 o'clock sun. When you start using your phone after kind of 2 p.m. in the afternoon, just turn your screen settings down. So go into kind of night mode from this time of day onwards. So the mobile phone light you get at night is essentially telling your brain it's 2 p.m. in the afternoon still. This is kind of peak frequency, hence your blinking. So it's how bad mobile phones are for all your hormonal balances. So when you from this day onwards, set your timing so your phone light will come down because it's connected to the sun. Anyway, can I just borrow someone to replace me as a model? So we're going to look back to how that big toe connects back to those forces of the club now. Come on then. You're not too far away. Just come and take your start position for me. I want you just as best you can with that left foot. Do that for me. So if I kind of put the foot on the club, what I want you to do is try and pull the handle up and rotate. With that toe off the ground. Okay, come back for me now. Now with that big toe connected to the ground, now pull up and rotate. Yeah. A little bit powerful, but I wasn't trying to do that. The minute you lose that big toe, good luck then producing that wonderful how the hand elevate and pull up through impact, which we know connects back to rotation, distance, connection, all these areas again. So we'll do that as best I can again. So lose your big toe, now try and pull up for me. I'm applying the pressure there. Now come back again for me. Now pull up and rotate through that big toe. So that big toe kind of hand-paw connection, the idea of that push-pull, expansion, compression, for the hands to actively pull up, which we know connects to distance, we know connects to rotation, we know connects to connection, we know connects back to all these areas, is very dependent on that lead big toe staying down. So maybe if you're happy, maybe come on the grass or just do it in pairs if you can, guys. So just come a little forwards for me. Everyone come on the grass. Do this in pairs. Just if you're happy, your partner stand on your club. Just play with that. How hard can you pull up and rotate when you lose that big toe connection?